Thoughts on the game?
Oh, man, I think it's going to be a good game. Obviously, I know Clemson is, I think, the powerhouse in the country, not just in the ACC. So I'm sure Coach Bronco is definitely making sure his team is ready to go. And I think UVA is going to look at it as an opportunity to kind of get some more respect for themselves as a program.
What makes you say Clemson's the powerhouse in the country?
I mean, they have the best players. I think you look at the quarterback, you look at the receivers he has, you look at the defense. I think so many times people harp on the offense because they're the ones putting up the numbers and, scoring the touchdowns and pretty points. But I think at the end of the day, the defense is what gives that offense the fuel. They give them more opportunities with the ball. They give them shorter fields, so it's easier to score. And I just think the DNA of Coach Venables as their defensive coordinator, I played against him when I was in college. And they weren't necessarily the Clemson they are now, but I know how they operate, and you see it week in and week out. Tough, mean, and just gap sound. Like, they're smart. Nobody's trying to be a hero. They play complementary football, and I think that's the best thing that you could say about Clemson.
As a quarterback, putting yourself in Bryce Perkins' shoes this week, what do you think Clemson is going to try to do defensively to kind of contain him and limit his effectiveness?
I would assume they're going to probably spy him with one or two guys. I know a guy like Isaiah Simmons, freak athlete, speed, mentally tough. Like, he's always in the right spot to make a play. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they had him spy Bryce just in case he breaks out of the pocket. Surprisingly, when you watch the Virginia Tech game, they didn't really key in on his running ability, and that's why he was able to get so many yards on the ground. But I think if Clemson says, hey, if we can stop this guy, at least cut his numbers in half on the ground, we have a really good shot to beat them. So if they can hold him under 50 yards rushing, I think they'll have a really good chance.
What do you see from Virginia's supporting cast to maybe think that Perkins doesn't necessarily have to do it all?
No, and he doesn't. I think at the end of the day, your receivers still have to step up for you. I think a guy, Terrell Jana, who's been huge the past couple weeks, not a name that we talked about a bunch early in the season, but I think the past 4 or 5 weeks he's really shown up. I think Joe Reed is a guy who can be special, not just on offense, but also on special teams. And then the defense. I mean, since Bryce Hall got hurt, I think that collectively they've all stepped up and tried to pick up that void. They're not perfect, and nobody is, but they're going to have to be perfect tomorrow versus a Clemson team that, really any receiver, any running back can catch it 5 yards and take it to the house. So the biggest thing for UVA's defense is make sure you get those guys on the ground. Don't try to go in there trying to arm tackle and things like that.
What do they have to do, Virginia, to try to keep it close and stay competitive for 4 quarters?
Create turnovers. I think if they can create turnovers early in the game, they'll have a better shot of keeping it close. I think, Clemson feeds off of that kind of stuff. If they feed off that momentum, they're going to have a ton of fans here. We're not too far from Clemson, South Carolina. So, that big momentum, if it gets on their side early, it might be a little tough for UVA. But I'm sure their fans are going to pack this thing out too. We're not too far from Charlottesville either. So if they can create turnovers early and limit their own turnovers, I think the game will be a little tighter than in the first half than it should be.
Going back to Clemson's defense, an ACC coach said anonymously that they don't have the dudes that they had last year, no premier talent, but they do everything right.
Yep.
Do you agree with that?
I'm not going to say they don't have premier talent. They do. I think they have guys that will be first, second, third round picks in the NFL draft. They may not have the big names, like those guys that went early in the draft on the D-line, but like you said, they're very gap sound. When you watch their defense, there's really no creases to have any type of run game. That's why they, limit teams to, I think, 90 yards, per game on the ground. So that's something that I know they'll key in for Bryce. And it's not just Bryce always running. They have Wayne Talapapa who can run too. But at the end of the day, if you look at the stat sheet, Bryce is the guy that's, having usually the most carries in the game. So if they can limit him, they'll be fine.
Do you think that Clemson will you've seen Virginia a lot, maybe try to play a little bit more zone considering they are gap sound, to maybe try and frustrate him a little bit?
I don't think so. I think they might play man because they trust that their DBs are good enough to cover their receivers, and when you play man, you make the quarterback make accurate throws. And not to say Bryce can't do it. I've seen him do it. He put his team on his back versus Carolina and had some really nice throws. But I know sometimes he might throw it some air and lob some deep balls out there, and Clemson guys might try to get a hand on it, with that pressure getting to him in the pocket. So if I were the defense, I would go ahead and man up every now and then, especially on third down. Don't play two-man because that's when the quarterback can take off and run. But first, second down, definitely man up and see if Bryce can make those competitive throws, which I think he can too.
What are your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence? Is he playing better than any quarterback in the country?
Without a doubt. Trevor is I think, a every 10-year type of talent. You watch him on tape. He's big, he's strong, he's smart. He's a great teammate. I've seen him pick up his offensive line when they're, slacking a little bit on protections or pointing out protections for his running backs. And, I'm doing a segment on him tomorrow, just how he kind of picks up for his teammates. And, again, he's not perfect, and I think early in the season, a lot of us were all trying to make him perfect, saying, oh, these interceptions, where's this coming from? But at the end of the day, quarterback position is hard. It's extremely tough, and I think he's going to be a guy for sure is going to be a top 5 pick whenever he does decide to go into the NFL.
Is he playing better than anybody in the country right now, Trevor?
I think
as
so.
well as any quarterback
I think, yeah. As well as you can play. Above 75% completion percentage, no interceptions, putting his team in opportunities to win the games. And that, at the end of the day, that's how quarterbacks are rated. Your win-loss column, your stats are all pretty and all that, but if you win games, you win championships, I think that's how that's how you're evaluated at the end of the day, and that's what he's doing.
EJ, this has been a pretty one-sided game for the better part of this whole decade between your alma mater and Clemson have done. It's two teams that have really controlled the ACC championship game. What big of a boost is that for the Tigers and for UVA, who knows what they're up against? Is that a block in their head, do you think? I
don't think so. I think you come into this game with a neutral mind. You don't worry about what teams have been here before. This is a big opportunity. When you play at UVA or Clemson, this is what you go to those schools for, an opportunity to play on this stage in an NFL stadium, primetime football, Friday night. Nobody else is playing in the conference beside these two teams. So I think if guys look at it that way, this is where you make a name for yourself and give yourself a chance to play at the next level.
Do you think the ACC needs another 10-win team more regularly?
It would be awesome to have another 10-win team just for us to talk about on the huddle. But Eric and I were talking about that. If we can get 2 more teams to just pick it up, I think the ACC as a whole would get a lot more respect, nationally. And, a lot of people wouldn't be as hard on our top dog, which is Clemson right now. I think that's where a lot of that disrespect kind of comes from. Some of the other teams, like UVA might have a great couple weeks and they lose to somebody, and then Miami has a couple weeks and they lose. Pitt, same thing. So Florida State, same way. Struggling with some of these FCS teams early in the season is embarrassing, but at the end of the day, if we could get another team to have 9-10 wins, we'll be in better shape as a conference.
Seems to me people forget a couple of years ago it was the SEC maybe that people thought was down a lot.
Yeah.
And it was because of quarterback play. Mm-hmm. Now the ACC is down. There's not a lot of premier quarterbacks, a lot of musical chairs. Do you think that is maybe one big issue?
Surprisingly, I think this is going to be one of the better conferences with quarterbacks, though. You look at Louisville's quarterback, Mikael Cunningham. You look at Trevor, obviously he'll be back next year. James Blackman, I think, is going to make a push. We're going to lose Bryce Perkins, but he's moving on. Jaron Williams can pick things up. It's a lot of good quarterback play. Sam Howell is an all-star. I think he's going to be really, really good in the next couple of years. So as far as quarterback play, I think that as a conference, it's all going to get more competitive. It's going to get cleaner. It's not going to be as many bonehead mistakes from the quarterback position. One of those like head scratcher type ideas. So I think it's going to get better. A lot of these guys are young. They're freshmen, they're sophomores. Sam is a true freshman. So just considering how well he's played this year, I think says a lot about Coach Mack Brown and that coaching staff. So I think this conference is in good shape as far as quarterbacks.
What do you think about tomorrow night's matchup between Virginia's quarterback Perkins and Clemson's defensive coordinator Venables?
Yeah, I think you give Coach Venables. I'm sure he probably started watching tape on UVA 2 or 3 weeks ago. Trying to key in on how he can stop Bryce, and I don't think you can stop him. I think you just try to contain him. I think one of the things Virginia Tech didn't do on defense was stop him on the run, and that's kind of what gets that momentum going for that UVA team. I think when UVA sees Bryce come into the locker room, they all get excited. He's that kind of guy for that team, and but I do know Coach Venables is a great coach. He has the talent. He has the guys on defense that are smart enough, unselfish enough to play team football, complementary football, and not try to make the big play and give something else up in exchange. So I think they'll be fine.
You getting a little anxious for Florida State to make a hire?
Not really. I think you take your time in these situations. I'm not going to be the one to say, hey, who's going to be, rush them, and because this is one of those decisions that has to work. You fire Coach Taggart, and if you don't get it right, it's going to be a lot of upset fans, a lot of upset people and players. So take your time. I hope that they're doing their due diligence and making sure they're making the right choice.
You feel like Florida State needs to be good, the ACC to be good?
Of course. They need to be good for the country. At the end of the day, when you turn on the TV, you watch college football, you think of Florida State, you think of Florida, Miami, obviously now Clemson. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you didn't really think of Clemson like that, but it's good that they're our leader right now. But, when you think of college football, you think of those types of programs, and I think they'll get back. At the end of the day, we weren't great when I first got there, but Jimbo had the infrastructure, got in enough good players, and we were able to turn things around. So, college football is in waves. It's just all about recruiting and who you can bring in as talent.
When you look at tomorrow night's game, what would you do if you had a guy like Isaiah Simmons you had to scheme for every week?
I'd keep an eye on him every play. You know, I'd point out wherever number 11 is and make sure my offensive line, my running backs know where that guy is because he can play coverage, he can rush you as a passer. He's a guy that I think with him on the field, he infects the game. He kind of throws a monkey wrench in your offensive game plan, so I'm sure that they're keying in on him and making sure that they have somebody at least blocking him every single play.
You mentioned Clemson potentially using a spy. Would Simmons be someone you think would sort of fill that role?
I think so. Either him or maybe a defensive end, or maybe you bring down Tanner Muse, the safety, and try to get him to spy a little bit. Maybe he plays a little bit of linebacker. You bring in an extra corner or something like that to play his position at safety. But I think you have to because Bryce, if he gets loose, I mean, he can change the game with his legs, and not just his legs, but also his arm. So I think the biggest thing is trying to limit him to his carries.
People don't realize